Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert. And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello and welcome back to Last Library on the Left. My name is Jennifer.
And my name is Sadina. We're a horror review and discussion podcast where we talk about horror in books, movies, and other formats, why we seek it out, and why we need it in our lives.
Today, we are completing our first go through of Guillermo del Toro's films. We'll be talking about The Shape of Water, a 2017 film, and Crimson Peak, a 2015 film.
I don't think either one of us was particularly interested in watching Shape of Water until we discussed this episode, but I'm glad I watched it. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I don't think I ever would have watched it if we didn't decide to cover it. I gotta be honest. But you know what? It was surprisingly okay. Not my favorite of his, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I like the play on What the Little Mermaid, which I also found out Guillermo del Toro wanted to do a play on Beauty and the Beast, but for me, it gave me a lot of Little Mermaid vibes, so whatever.
Yeah, I don't think I would have thought The Beauty and the Beast at all.
No, I thought Beauty and the Beast more for Crimson Peak because she kept wearing that yellow ball gown, so I don't know.
Well, he was definitely a beast.
Right?
And he had been turned into a beast.
So we'll start off with The Shape of Water just because we really want to gush on Crimson Peak. And like I said before, The Shape of Water was released in 2017. It was directed by Guillermo del Toro and it was written by Guillermo del Toro and Vanessa Taylor. It stars Sally Hawkins as Eliza Esposito, Doug Jones as the Amphibian Man, Richard Jenkins as Giles, Octavia Spencer as Zelda Fuller, Michael Shanahan as Richard Strickland, Dimitri/Hofstetler was played by Michael Stuhlbarg, and Nick Searcy as General Hoyt. It's set in the 1960s. Eliza and Zelda are good friends, and they work as a part of the janitorial staff in a government facility. Eliza is mute. She communicates via sign language, and a mysterious creature is brought into the facility, and Eliza develops a connection with the creature. And we'll talk about plot as we go through our spiel. But like I said before, I got total play on The Little Mermaid, the amphibian man not speaking, and obviously towards the end she went in the water with them, and total Little Mermaid vibes. And then when I was doing some research on it, I saw that Guillermo del Toro, it was his play on Beauty and the Beast, and the Beast was in fact Strickland. And I was like, well, I guess, but it didn't connect to me too much.
Yeah, me neither. I sort of get that, but in The Beauty and the Beast is redeemed at the end, and Strickland wasn't.
Yeah, and the only other play I could think of was maybe the Beast was the amphibian man who, much like the prince, wasn't really a beast at all. But I don't know. To me, the amphibian didn't do anything bad throughout his whole time there except maybe eat a cat, which that was kind of funny, the fish eating a cat.
Oh my god, that's actually a lot. I mean, it's not funny because I was really sad, but I now I can find it kind of funny because yeah, you're right. That's really ironic.
The irony wasn't lost on me, right?
Oh, it completely went over my head because all I saw was a poor cat being eaten, and I was like, no.
I was just like,
so close your eyes.
I like that. I kind of took you by surprise there.
It did. And Chainsaw was like curled up on the couch next to me while I watched these movies, and so I was like, Chainsaw, don't look.
Oh, poor Chainsaw. I hope he didn't see anything.
No, he was sleeping pretty hard, but I was pretty traumatized.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that scene was really creepy. I was like, oh, wait, this is a horror director. Of course, we're going to see the cat without a head. That's disgusting.
Yeah. The amphibian man did feel bad about it later, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I liked how he acted almost like a pet afterwards. One of the things that I wrote down, Giles acts as the narrator of the whole story. He says in the beginning that he wants to tell you of this love story that was torn apart by a monster. Hearing that, I was like, okay, so who's the monster? So immediately I thought Giles, because he's Eliza's neighbor, and they have a common shared hobby of watching old classic movies. And so I thought immediately, like, oh, he's going to be her love interest, and the amphibian man is the monster. But no, that wasn't it. The amphibian man was her love interest, and the monster was Strickland, obviously. Well, most humans, right? Because
Yeah.
the whole government facility, with the exception of
Dimitri.
Dimitri.
Fleming is the head of security.
Yeah, the head of security. Because he just didn't have a clue. Anyway.
No. Yeah, I like how Sterling was like, we got to keep this quiet. And he was like, oh, I already reported it. He was like, you did what? He's like, yeah, I reported it as soon as it happened.
Like, wow, how did you get this position, sir?
Well, I will say though, that is technically his job to like
Right.
inform people like right away a breach of security. But it didn't even occur to him that they may want to keep that secret. He seemed so pleased with himself too. He did not read the fact that Sterling was mad at him.
We did it. It's so funny.
He kept looking at him like, did I do good? Are you pleased?
Right, yeah. Which actually takes me into Strickland, because Strickland, who is the guy who works for the government that brought in the amphibian creature from South America, he calls him the asset. He was really creepy, and while I didn't like him when he played General Zod, so when he played Zod, I was like, yeah, you're still creepy and you're kind of weird, but in Shape of Water, I was really scared.
Now that you've said that Del Toro was thinking of Beauty and the Beast with him, he definitely is a good Gaston.
Yeah, he played it well. The way he treated his wife when they were having sex, I was like disgusted. And then when he had the encounter with Eliza, where he's telling her that he figures out that she can't really say anything, and that sort of turns him on. And I think he was about to sexually assault her.
Yeah.
You know, just, oh God, it's so gross. Then he had a catalog. I was like, he's just trying to make it seem, to me, these were all items that he used to make it seem like he was better than everyone else, knowing that he really wasn't.
Yeah, no, I have written here that he was an obvious allegory for the fault of American exceptionalism that was really touted during the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, it's just disgusting. And even then, I think he knew and he was disgusted with himself because he seemed almost desperate to please his superiors, General Hoyt and all them. And so I just kept thinking, obviously he's our antagonist in the movie and he's the villain in the movie, which it's funny that the villain of the movie was a white man. But he knew he was disgusting, and I felt like he was disgusted with himself. I don't know that he cared to do anything about it.
No, I think he was trying really hard to be the epitome of the great all-American man image. Or, I mean, every single scene that he was in really was a very clear parallel to the American exceptionalism ideal that they brought out a lot during the Cold War.
I mean, and how do I put this in a non-bad way? He was just, I just hated him. I just hated it.
No, he was really gross.
Yeah, he was really gross. He reminds me of all things that are bad in America right now.
Wait, you said that because I wrote here that he would be a MAGA follower. Oh God.
One other thing that I wrote about Strickland was how surprised and almost he was caught off guard with the fact that the amphibian man was a god in the end. I think had he known, he would have used it to his advantage, right?
Yeah, I think that there were a couple of things that really caught him off guard at the end because he has a line along the lines of, I don't fail, but he was wrong about the strike force. I think his intuition was initially pulling him towards Eliza and Zelda. He even interrogated them because they were the only two time cards he pulled up first. He called them together when he didn't necessarily have to. And I think he genuinely suspected them first. And then Eliza very intelligently used the stigma people project on the disabled. And he was like, wait, why am I wasting time with not only you, but the two of you as the cleaners? And he was like, no, this can't be possible. Right. And then she cursed him out.
I like how Zelda was like, she just said thank you. Clearly she did not, but good call, Zelda.
Well, she was saying thank you at the end, but she was not doing it in the beginning. Yeah, no, I thought that was so smart of her to use his projected prejudice of her being mute against him, even though he clearly suspected them at first. And then he wound up chasing his own tail for the rest of the time, which was brilliant.
Yeah, I think it was either Fleming or the general when they were talking to Strickland and they were like, oh, who could have done this? Who could have gotten this amphibian man out? And they're talking about it had to have been like 6 men or something like that. And
yeah, it had to have been 10 men at least.
It was like
highly trained and well funded.
And no, the cleaning lady, her friend, and someone else driving the car.
Yep. And then when he got Dimitri, which kind of pissed me off that Dimitri gave them up so fast, but I think it was because Dimitri found it so funny that he had been so blindsided by it.
Yeah.
He was like, they have no name or rank. They were just cleaners. And the look on Strickland's face was like, fuck me.
Right. And to your point of, he says, I never fail. That reminds me of so many, again, I'm going to say white guys, because when they hear no, you know what? Guys in general, sometimes, let's just be real here. When they hear no or things don't go their way, a lot of time there's a lot of tantrums that are had. So this definitely reminded me of that, like the poor bruised male ego here.
The most fragile of creatures.
If those aren't true words, I don't know what are. I also wrote down a little bit about Eliza because I really liked her characterization and how they addressed being mute, because her being mute was not an issue at all. Right. It was just sort of part of the character, which that was one of the things that I really, really liked, because in today's world, I feel like you're almost forced to kind of identify yourself as to what you are, sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity. And I feel like, just speaking for myself, being a Caribbean, Indian, Canadian, American, it's just part of my identity. And so it's just who I am as I wake up. And I feel like her being mute wasn't an issue for those around her that loved and cared for her. It was just part of Eliza, and it wasn't a big deal. It was just part of who she is, and she was liked for it. And it wasn't until Strickland came along that it was actually put at the forefront. Because even when she was an amphibian man, it was never about her being mute.
No, and it very clearly was not a hindrance to her communication with the people in her life until Strickland made it a more visible aspect of herself.
Yeah.
And he asked a lot of dumb questions.
Yeah. Disgusting questions. Just bleh.
Yeah, I love Octavia Spencer, and she was probably my favorite in this entire movie.
Yes. I loved how she complained about her husband.
Who, by the way, was useless.
Yeah, he wasn't. She let him know. Spoken how many years, and now you choose to speak?
Like, you just need to shut up. But I was like, yeah, you tell him.
Yeah, she just... And I loved how she stood up for her friend. I loved how she didn't judge Eliza when Eliza told her that her and the amphibian man had sex. She was just like, how? Oh, a man will find a way.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Like, she was the friend that I want. I like her.
Zelda was definitely a saving grace in the movie.
I think so, and I think that might have been why I just decided to give it a chance. I hear Chainsaw.
He wants back in, but he just wants to play with the door. What? Where are you? You're not even anywhere near here. You must have like walked away and cried. Like the toddler you are.
I mean, for real.
Jeez, he's such a brat.
Oh man, but he knows I'm not there, so I need these antics.
Maybe he's just putting on a show.
Right. He knows we're recording, so he's like, I gotta get in on the episode too. I also really love, like I said, Chainsaw. I loved Eliza's own self-confidence and her strength, because when she wanted to rescue the amphibian man and she was talking to Giles, and Giles was like, no, we shouldn't do it. And she kept saying, if we don't do anything, something worse might happen to him. And I thought, how timely is that? The whole, if you see something, say something. And as someone who's been trained to just kind of keep quiet and mind your business, it definitely rung with me. If you don't do anything, something bad might actually happen. So I really like that. And I love how she was drawn to water even before she met the amphibian man, because we see her schedule and her routine. She's always drawn to the water, and it sort of comforts her. And I'm a water sign, so I get it, because water is my comfort. So that was really cool. And it made me think that maybe her injuries on her neck are actually turned into gills. And so it made me wonder if her mother had a relationship with an amphibian person and died giving birth to her, but maybe she was one of the last of the species.
I had the same theory, because when they initially show the scars, I was like, oh, those are very clearly gills. She was also an orphan, but she was also an orphan of South American descent. And that's where he originated. And I was like, you know what? She's probably somehow distantly related to his species, and that's another reason why they feel so connected.
Yeah, I didn't put together because I know her name is Eliza Esposito, but I didn't really put together that she was from South America too. I didn't connect those dots, which, I mean, obviously now, yes, of course. So it kind of fits in. Man, Del Toro, he just leaves clues everywhere. You just got to pick up on them.
Well, and I think another clue that he left was actually, she lived above a movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the movies that they were constantly playing was the story of Ruth. And there's a book of Ruth from the Old Testament. And she was someone that was not, she didn't originate from the Israelites, but she married into the Israelites and like took on the faith and everything. But when her husband died, she stayed with the Israelites and stayed to protect her mother-in-law. And then they moved and traveled and stuff. And she married Boaz. And I think that was kind of him foreshadowing Eliza's journey.
Oh, yeah, that could be it. See, and I knew that they kept playing the same one, but I didn't put that connection together. And I mean, obviously, I don't know about that religious stuff. I barely know my own. And when I was doing some research on The Shape of Water, just before I even watched it, I had seen that there were a lot of religious references, which I completely didn't get. I have no knowledge of them because I don't know the Christian religion. And so I don't have any of those references for you. But I heard that there were a lot of them in there. So if anyone knows, and you can let me know what those were.
I mean, I just got the Book of Ruth. So yeah, there's very possibly a ton of them, especially since I didn't realize that Ruth is connected to the New Testament.
Those are just words to me. I'm so sorry, y'all. When you're a different religion and you're growing up in America, you hear the basic things. I know Easter, I know Christmas, I barely know Ash Wednesday, I know Jesus, I know Mary, I know Judas, but I mean, I don't really get a lot of other Christian references because I was lucky enough to grow up and meet people of different cultures and different religions. So I have a basic understanding of Islam. Through you, I'm learning a little bit more about Judaism, and it's just nice. Like my best friend, she's Buddhist, so I get little nuggets from everyone. So I don't know.
No, and that's the best way to do it, is to like pick up little nuggets about everyone. Yeah, I know, because then you learn just how similar everyone is anyway. Like a lot of the same stuff is just repeated over and over again.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned a long time ago was that Jesus and Lord Krishna from the Hindu faith are similar in their beliefs, and I think they were based off of the same person. And it's something that when I have the time, I would love to research it because that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. We'll have to do that together because I would love to learn more about that.
Right? Yeah. Just wow. Yeah. All the other religious references I didn't get, and I don't know. Y'all could tell us. So the only last thing I have is just some references that obviously you'll catch on. Of course, the amphibian man looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon. And then I noticed the egg timer in her daily routine, that she uses the egg timer when she like self-pleasures herself. But I also noticed that she uses the eggs to bond with the amphibian man at first. And so I was very right. And so I was like, I wonder if that's symbolic for sexual feelings for her. It was very clear eggs, always eggs. And I just was like, that's interesting.
I didn't pick up on the egg thing, but that's like really, yeah, you're probably right because, I don't think though that she realized her own sexual feelings until later, because when she first kind of came into contact with a potential sexual encounter with him, it freaked her out at first, but then she was like, you know what, fuck it, let's do this.
Right. And so I wonder if it was subconscious for her. The only reason I caught on is because they focused so much on her turning that 3 minutes on the egg timer. What does this mean? And I was like, oh, I see what this means. And then when she gave him the first egg, I was like, wait a minute, is there a correlation here? But that was the only real thing that I really caught up on. I didn't really catch anything else. I kind of let the story, I just kind of enjoyed it for what it was. I told you in pre-production, I didn't understand how this one won an Academy Award and not any of his others. And I stick by that because while it was good, it wasn't one of my favorite of his works. I can name a dozen others that are better.
I think it was probably a lot of the messages that were in it, because in the very, very beginning, Giles is talking about the myth of Tantalus, and he talks about how that's how we got our word tantalizing, because it's something that you desire but is just out of reach. And then that kind of summed up the entirety of the movie, that there was something that everybody desired. The Russian desired knowledge. He told his superiors that, yeah, he took the job sort of as a spy for Pride and Country, but he also did it because he's a scientist. In the end, we realize that he favors knowledge over over nationalism, which is bravo. That's how it should
Right,
be.
because he knew a long time ago what Eliza was doing with the amphibian.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was like writing down notes.
Yeah. You know, I'm actually really glad the way his character turned out, because when he first was in the shadows watching her with the eggs, I was like, oh crap, please don't tell me this man has been like watching her this whole time and is now jealous and da da da, and he's gonna compromise everything. But no, it turns out that he's an ally.
Yeah, I was really shocked when he helped them. I was like, oh, well, look at this guy that I thought was gonna be bad turned out to be a good guy. Like,
A really good guy.
yeah, I was heartbroken when he died because I was like, oh, he did the right thing.
Not only did he die, but he was betrayed by his people, and then Strickland came, and I was like, this is all terrible. I hate it. Dimitri deserved better for sure.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed was how, so he was really forthcoming with his team of Russians when he first started or whatever. And then I think as, you know, as we realized he was a good guy, his willingness to share what he learned with anyone diminished because he just wanted to protect the amphibian man, which was really cool, especially considering that, you know, it's a top secret government operation that they're doing. And how many of those are going on right now that we don't know about? And how many Dimitris are there helping us? Yeah.
So another thing I noticed, because I felt like the Russian was saving the amphibian man as an attempt to save science and knowledge. It felt to me that the neighbor was, because the neighbor at first didn't want to help her because he felt like he was about to regain some part of his life that he had lost. And then when he saw that that part of his life was not coming back at all, he was like, well then look, let me help my neighbor who is trying to save something that she sees reflected in herself. And he was like, that's worth saving. And then Eliza, of course, wanted to save the possibility of something that she saw, because she was telling Giles, I'm mute, he's mute, what's the difference between us? He sees me for who I am, not what I lack. It was romantic in a sense, but everything felt more like an allegory, especially for issues of homophobia and racism.
Yeah. And I get the romance part of it because, like, when she's on the amphibian man, she couldn't express how much she loved him. That's really romantic. I get that he sees her, she sees him, and who they are to the outside world doesn't matter. And I just kept thinking, like, don't we all deserve friends like that? Like, you know what I mean? I just kept thinking, like, we deserve managers like that and friends like that and family like that. And how different would the world be if people just saw us for how good we are or how bad we are rather than our skin color and who we want to love and that kind of stuff. So I get that it was a romance story, but I didn't get the romance.
Yeah. There was something that kind of began to sort of make me feel a little uncomfortable as it got closer to them releasing him into the canal. It felt like, yes, she had rescued him and yes, she was keeping him safe, but you never saw her tell him when she was going to release him. All you saw was him in a new space of captivity. And then kind of the issue of like a power dynamic where she definitely had the power of his new captivity, even though that isn't really what it was. And then Giles was like, wow, he made my hair grow back and he healed me. He is a god. We should keep him for a little while. Yeah. And then she was, engaging in sexual activity with him. And I was like, that feels really gross. And like the power dynamic between the two is kind of shifted into some uncomfortable territory, especially since you don't know exactly how he feels. And you really don't see that requited love until the end.
Yeah. Well, and when he gets sick too, because she was scheduled to release him around the 10th because it was set to rain that day. And like you said, as Giles was healed and as she started falling in love with him and having sex with him, yeah, I was worried. Are you really going to set him free or is he just a prisoner in your home now?
Right.
And it wasn't until he got sick, I think, that maybe she wasn't going to. Who knows?
Yeah, she even flooded her apartment in an attempt to make it a more suitable environment for him. But I was like, please just stick to the original plan of releasing him. Like, get that you're in love, but you're too different. There's no way that he could survive there. And that's just, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
What?
Very good insight. Very good insight.
Yes, thank you, Chainsaw, for your 2 cents. I don't know. It felt very uncomfortable. And so it wasn't until the very end when he was able to heal himself and then help heal her, which triggered her gills to finally open, that I was like, okay, this feels more comfortable. This feels more like they're on the same level.
Yeah. And I like how at the end, Giles like, I assumed that they had a happy ending, as if he didn't heal her, she just died or whatever. I was like, don't do that.
I know, because it wasn't until he said that I was like, oh, right, he can't see under the water.
Yeah. Right. And they wouldn't come back to tell him.
Right. He doesn't know what happened. Yeah. Damn it, Giles, I was fine without you saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, this is just this is the orphanage all over it. Because I thought of you, and I was like, I really thought that the dad was going with them, and I was like, oh wait, maybe he just saw them, or oh maybe it wasn't that he knew that they were okay. I was like, no.
I did that to Pan's Labyrinth too for you.
Yeah,
I was like, I
you
think it
did.
was just her dying. I'm here to ruin it all for you.
I mean, it's all
Apparently.
right. I'm seeing the theme now with Del Toro. He's not really trying to give us happy endings. He's trying to make us think that they're happy, and maybe they're not.
Right. I did not like the pie guy at the very end. He
Oh
seemed
God,
like
I
he
forgot
got
about him.
it felt to me that the pie guy went from like really nice and kind of amiable to really overtly aggressive in that very cliched 1950s 1960s white male midwestern black people don't deserve rights and gay people are monsters or whatever, and he
Mhm.
went to that so fast that I was like, all right, are you compensating for something, little midwestern boy who ran away to the city?
Yeah, and I was immediately put back into how uncomfortable I felt watching Lovecraft. And I was like, I don't like this guy, not one single bit. And it took the second time they went into the diner for me to realize why I didn't like him. Because like I heard what he said when they first went in the diner to get the lemon pie or whatever. I heard what he said and I was like, okay. And when he said, y'all come back, I was like, okay, whatever. But the second time, I was like, you're a disgusting excuse for a human being. Blech.
Yeah, it was not a good look. Now, I did think that the music was very fairy tale esque, but it felt so detached from the actual scenery because the scenery felt so washed out. It was all blues and greens.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense. She seems so demure and so inside of herself. But
Hmm.
then as her and the amphibian man begin to grow closer, the more red shows up in her clothes.
Yeah.
Although I wonder if that was more of a nod to the character who was so, she blended in so much into the background for most of the people's perspectives. And it wasn't until she was finally seen for just who she was by the amphibian man that she came out of her shell.
Yeah, because I noticed when she was really getting into her relationship with him and her connection with him that Zelda didn't talk as much as she was in the very beginning. It was very much the beginning of it. Zelda was the majority of the talking of their relationship while Eliza just kind of went through her day. And that was her with everybody. But then she really started really coming out of her shell and speaking up for herself, and the changes in the wardrobe, the changes in her attitude. Yeah. I've got a new liking for her. I would like to see
Mhm.
other things she does. I don't know of any other movies Sally Hawkins has been in, but I'm going to look her up maybe later tonight. Good movie, not the best, but enjoyed it.
I still enjoyed it. I thought that they definitely set up early that she was going to be sort of a similar species to him with the gills. I don't think that they deflected that well with Strickland assuming that they were scars, but maybe I just thought he was an idiot by then, so I didn't really respect his opinion.
Yeah. I didn't notice them, to be honest, until he pointed them out. And I think it's just because I was sitting there trying to figure out why I was watching the movie, to be honest. Where is it going? What shape is it going to take? Because I already had prior knowledge of this movie because it won an Academy Award and won all these awards when it was out. And I was like, when are we getting to the amphibian man? Because I thought that was the same character from Hellboy, which it's not.
Oh.
So I was like, is this his like story?
His like origin story.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm waiting to see this sucker.
I get where you got that
Yeah.
from though.
Yeah. I love Hellboy and Hellboy 2. Those are two of my top movies. I love them. So I just kept thinking, like, when's the guy coming that I know who's coming? And when is he going to start talking? Because I know he talks. I was like, no, this is not the right guy.
That's hilarious.
I know. And it doesn't help that Doug Jones plays both the amphibian man and I
Right.
can't even remember his name in Hellboy now.
Abe Sapien.
Yeah, Abe Sapien. So it doesn't help that Doug Jones plays both. But again, he
Yeah.
plays everything.
Yeah, he plays everything. So that's actually a really great way to sort of lead into Crimson Peak because he played Lady Sharp, the mother, and I was looking real hard in the movie to see him through it. The painting. Okay, you know what? We'll get into it. Let me go and do all the credits
Yeah.
because it wasn't until it got to the painting that I was like, oh, okay, no, I see that they just put Doug Jones in drag and then like did a painting of him. Like Jennifer said, Crimson Peak was made in 2015. It was produced, directed, and written by Guillermo del Toro. There were other producers, Callum Green, John Joshny, and Thomas Tull, and another writer was Matthew Robbins. It starred Mia Wasikowski as Edith Cushing, Tom Hiddleston as Sir Thomas Sharp, Jessica Chastain as Lady Lucille Sharp, Charlie Hunnam as Dr. Alan McMichael, Jim Beaver as Carter Cushing, Bern Gorman as Holly, and Doug Jones as Lady Sharp, the mother. Real quick, I did not realize that Jim Beaver was the father. The beard really changes his face.
Yeah, because when you read that, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, it wasn't until I wrote down the casting and then started rewatching the movie that I was like, I did not see him as Jim Beaver the first time I saw this.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot to look past that facial hair to see it now.
Now, Charlie Hunnam, I kind of thought it was him. And the only reason why I know of him is because listen, we're going to go into some of my other interests. One of them is the 50 Shades book series. I read it when it first came out. So when they were casting, I was really interested because I wanted to see who this man was going to be played by. And Charlie Hunnam had gotten the role.
Oh.
And
wait, he's not in that movie though.
He's not. He pulled out because there was such backlash for him getting the role.
What?
Yeah, there was huge backlash.
Why?
They just didn't want Charlie Hunnam playing it. And I think because he was in Sons of Anarchy at the time, so maybe people couldn't see him being casted in that role.
Okay, see, that's freaking stupid though, because yeah, Sons of Anarchy is a badass show, but the guy that played the dad in Malcolm in the Middle also played one of the most scary villains of all time in Breaking Bad, Walter White.
Yeah,
so
and
like that's
it's just crazy.
It is. That's stupid.
I mean, I wanted Henry Cavill to play the man. I can't remember his name. Oh, Gray. 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah, obviously. I mean, that just goes to show you how much I follow it now. But I wanted Henry Cavill to play the lead character just because of my personal love for him. And when he was not cast, I was like, okay, well, whoever else is fine. But that's how I remember Charlie Hunnam because of all that backlash.
I only knew him as Sons of Anarchy. I was not part of the 50 Shades of Grey world, so I didn't know.
I just remember when 50 Shades came out, I was like, guys, this is tame compared to some of the other stuff, okay?
Yeah.
Just, okay, whatever. But yeah, that's how I knew him, so carry on.
I just want to say in general that everything about this movie was beautiful. The costume design, the backgrounds, the set design, that was beautiful. I was actually looking at the wallpaper in the bathroom while she was taking a bath, and I was like, how can I get that effect in the new house? Because I really like that.
I mean, same. Very, very beautifully done.
So after I was done watching the movie, I sat and thought about it, and I was like, do I find this movie as enthralling and romantic as I do because of the story and the acting, or does it have some measure of the set design and costume design? Oh my God, what? I'm not touching you. Leave me alone. The beginning of the movie is immediately her mother dies. She called it black cholera, but then her mother comes. She didn't say how far off it was from her passing away, but she comes to her when she's still very young and tells her to wear Crimson Peak, which, I mean, like, thanks, Mom. That's
what an obscure message.
Yeah, but she did later say in the narration that her mother's ghost seemed a little out of time, and so maybe she thought she was giving her the warning when it mattered. Edith is a writer, or she would like to be a writer. She would like to be a writer like Mary Shelley and die a widow.
I love that part.
Yeah, that was her comeback to another society woman's shade about how she would die. What was the word she used?
Spinster.
Yep, die a spinster like Jane Austen. And she was like, I would rather die a widow like Mary Shelley. Also, you're writing ghost stories. Of course you're more like Mary Shelley.
Right.
And then her editor, or an editor, is like, well, your handwriting is so pretty and da-da-da, but don't you think that your ghost story deserves to have a love story? And she gets really put off about that and decides that she's going to type up her story so that her handwriting doesn't give her away. She says she doesn't want to write a love story, which I thought was ironic because she winds up living a ghost love story.
Right.
I was like, well, okay. I was really, really taken with how supportive her father was.
Yeah.
He looked so hurt when she said that she wouldn't use the pen.
I know. I was like, oh, and she just kept eating. I was like, oh, you hurt your dad's feelings.
I know. He said, because I'm a builder, I know the tools needed. And so this is the tool you need for your craft.
Yeah.
And she was like, I really appreciate it, but I'm going to use a typewriter. And I was like, wait.
Yeah. I was like, oh gosh. Like,
so hurtful.
To me, she's very astute in the fact that the guy talked about her loops and her handwriting. Like she totally missed that with dad.
I know, and his poor hurt face, and I was like, ugh, Jim Beaver, how do you always look like the most supportive but disappointed but still love your kid's face ever? Anyway, although side note, I think that's the pen she used to stab Lady Lucille.
It is.
So it came back and I was like, all right, cool. Like at least dad was still there for her in some
Yeah.
way because he was very intuitive. I felt early on that Tom Hiddleston, as an actor, in the very first few scenes when he was sort of courting Edith, was very charming, but there were parts that fell off about his charm. And it reminded me of the very first movie I ever saw with Eddie Redmayne, which was this movie called Hick. And he's a very handsome man, but his demeanor in the movie had a lot of red flags that every woman grows up knowing to look for in predators.
Yeah.
And there'd be points in the movie where he would say or do something and that red flag would go up in my head. And then I'd be like, oh God, please, like, let this kid be okay. And then he would smile. And at the same time as the character would kind of relax and trust him, I found myself doing the same. That did not work out well. And I was like, oh God.
I remember when they were in the park and he was reading her story, I was like, is he really interested in her story? And then when he chose her for the waltz, I was like, why did he choose her? Why did he wait till her dad left to take her to the ball? I don't know. Yeah, I questioned him a lot too. But like you said, when he smiled, I was like, oh, well, look at him.
Yeah, and so far historically for me at least, it's only been British actors, so maybe I should be wary about that in general in my life. But these people who are very charming, and even though they have red flags in their personality or their demeanor, that one moment of what looks to be genuine affection comes across and you toss all the red flags out the window. And I was like, well, that's dangerous. And that's actually one of the things I really took from this movie, was that I was like, there's a part of me that always assumed past a certain age that I had learned all the signs and all the ways that men could be dangerous. And then I watched the movie Hick or the movie Crimson Peak, and it's like, oh crap, I'm still just as gullible as I was at 11.
I mean, even towards the end when he was coming around, I was like, I believed in him and he can be like, you know what I mean? Like I was still in that red flag zone. I don't know why. I mean, part of it is because I like Tom Hiddleston when he has black hair. There's that.
Oh, so I wasn't a big fan of Alan McMichael as a character in general because he felt like he was very intelligent but didn't have a lot of backbone or follow through until, the very end. He very, very clearly was into Edith and he gave up on her almost immediately.
Yeah, I don't know why. Because there was one point where he's talking to her solicitor, and the solicitor's like, oh, yeah, this is happening really fast, but I can't do anything but obey. And I just kept thinking, like, okay, Alan, why aren't you going over there and talking to Edith? Why didn't you stop her from moving? I don't know. Because he saw the ring on her finger. Dad's out of the way for this guy. Why aren't you stepping in? Because you were dad's confidant at one point. Why aren't you stepping in and being, even if you have to be the friend that she needs, be that?
Yeah, because you could tell he suspected foul play almost immediately.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of that, but there was one thing that I thought was really cool. She was looking at his books and was, reading out all the books about ophthalmology. And then she comes across Arthur Conan Doyle and she asked him, do you fancy yourself the detective?
Yeah.
And it felt like a little bit of a jab, because even by then his character seemed like it didn't have a lot of follow through, that yeah, maybe he fancied himself a lot of things but never followed through. But it was actually in that same scene that he did the coolest thing where he was talking about ghosts and comparing them to the ocular structure of the eye and theorizing how some people could see them and some people couldn't. And I was like, let's investigate this.
Yes, because that was really intriguing to me. And I was like, oh, please, let's go back into it. And I thought we were going to get more scenes of her and him exploring ghosts that way as she's writing the book. And when we didn't, I was really, really sad because I wanted that content.
Yeah, that would have been very cool. I would love research into that kind of phenomena, because the way he was like, yeah, the guy that was just in here, he can't see red or green, but he believes in their existence just because the people around him tell him they exist. And he's like, but he has no concept for them. I was like, this is so interesting. It's such an interesting sociological look at supernatural phenomena and the ways that different people view it and perceive it. And she was like, wow, you've never shown me this side of you. And he's like, well, we never have the time. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Make the time, have these conversations. for us because we want to hear about the ghosts.
And then it went back to being a very gothic, creepy, but beautiful romantic story
Yeah.
about Thomas Sharp instead. So I know that I already discussed how I see red flags and then disregard them in favor of a pretty face or a nice smile or whatever, which is very disturbing to me. But even with that in mind, so I wrote that 2 lines ago, and now my next line is Thomas Sharp is in love and being controlled, but I think his love is true. And it's like, God, you just I can't. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I did think that even by the dance, because his sister was clearly trying to guide him towards McMichael's sister, and they were going to prey upon her, and I'll discuss that later. So when he chose Edith, it looked like an act of rebellion because he said that he likes to close his eyes to things that make him uncomfortable, which means that I know, it's very disturbing, Chainsaw. It sounds like someone who's been like manipulated and brainwashed their entire lives and they just kind of go with the flow, which is sad.
Yeah.
Her comment was that she prefers to keep her eyes open, and I feel like he was falling in love with her even by that point. He even says it later, that she's nothing like her. I think that when it comes down to it, and maybe this is not good of me to think this way, and maybe it is toxic and not great, but I think that on many levels, Thomas Sharp was a damaged little boy still, and I know. And that Edith maybe saved him, and he was falling in love with her almost immediately because of it. Because his sister later asked him, she's like, why did you choose Edith? Because it made it sound like maybe she was making all the choices before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I have this soft spot for trying to understand and empathize with children that have been abused and brainwashed to empathize with their abusers that I just really felt for him as a character.
Yeah. I mean, early on, you notice that his sister is obviously running the show because I kept thinking, like, why is she there? Like, girl, get on with your own life. Let him do what he's got to do. And it was clear that they were a package deal, that he was making the choices, and he was obviously defying them because it was like, I chose her. And it kind of threw me back to nurture versus nature thing. So I was like, then the nurturing of their parents or lack thereof really influenced how they were brought up. And for Lucille, obviously, she turned out to be a psychopath. But for Thomas, it's, oh gosh, what is that syndrome?
Stockholm?
Yeah, like I feel like he almost had Stockholm syndrome with his sister, right?
Yeah.
Because she was protecting him when he was younger, or what she thinks is protecting him. Because they sort of hint that she was almost abusing him beforehand and that mom caught them. I just kept thinking, like, he's got a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, and I just felt really sad for him. Like you said, total red flags, but I feel like if I was put in that same position, I probably would have gone down the same road as Edith did and probably would have ended up the same way Edith did. You just felt for him.
I know. I even wrote in my notes that he kind of lets himself be controlled by just about anybody. I mean, he stood up to her father in the room initially because I think that she was in the room. Because at first he kind of wasn't making eye contact with him and was looking down. But once she entered the room, he seemed to get kind of a second wind to his arguments.
Yeah.
But then later, her father is like, I dug up some dirt on you, and now you're going to break her heart and leave. But it looked to me like he was breaking his own heart in the same way.
Yeah.
At the same time. And it just kind of, because it felt really specific. The way he went on an attack to her, it felt really specific. And I thought, he's attacking himself too.
Yeah. And the way he looked defeated after he did it, I felt like it wasn't defeated because he did what the dad wanted. I felt like it was defeated on his own behalf.
Yeah. And then, of course, the next scene is that her father is murdered. And to me, it was very clearly Lucille who murdered him because the way that her hair was always worn up, you actually see that in the silhouette. My question here is, so Lucille makes a comment later in the movie that he never gets his hands dirty, that she's always basically the one murdering people. Do you think Thomas Sharp knew Lucille went to murder Mr. Cushing? Or do you think that Thomas Sharp really thought they were going to take the money and go back to London?
I think that Thomas Sharp was set on taking the money and going back to London. So I think that he was set to go back to London because he knew what would happen if he engaged Edith any further based on the past. But I think he knew when Lucille killed the dad because the ring was already on her finger at the funeral, right? And so to me, she had already probably gone to him the day that Lucille killed the dad and said, like, I did what I needed to do. You need to follow through on your end.
That sounds very possible.
So I feel like he knew that Lucille killed the dad so that she could further their plans.
Yeah. Well, then, poor Jim Beaver is dead, and Alan McMichael suspects foul play, but Edith kind of keeps him from being able to investigate, which
I know, like, they ruled it an accident. I was like, that was no accident, friends.
yeah, Jim Beaver wasn't tall enough to get the momentum and force behind him slipping to get that level of damage to his face with
Yeah.
one hit.
No.
And McMichael knew that. And so he was trying to investigate when she went to identify his body. And then she was like, stop, leave my dad alone. He has image issues and all this other stuff. And I think out of affection for her, he stopped looking. And that was the wrong call to make, guy. You should have put your affection for her aside for like a moment.
Yeah. He made a lot of stupid choices.
Yeah. So she buries her dad and she goes off to Cumberland with the Sharps to live in their home. And even though the wall surrounding the property is decrepit and there's no vegetation or life on the hill, the house itself is very beautiful and breathtaking from the outside. But then you go inside and immediately you see that the beautiful and grand exterior is rotted and unkept and it's sinking into the red, which I thought was interesting because they have an economic problem in their family. They have like a financial issue. The house is literally sinking into the red, which is a stock issue.
I did not pick up on that. That's a good catch.
I'm just a good little nerd like that. And I also thought that the house represented not just the family itself, but the Sharps too, Thomas and Lucille, who on the exterior are both very beautiful people, but are gross and rotting on the inside. And almost immediately you find out that they've been preying on other women for some time now because the groundskeeper, Finley, he's like, oh, I know, because you've been married for so long. And she was like, what?
I kept thinking, like, Edith, I know you're smarter than this because we've seen you pick up on clues. It totally went over your head.
Right. And then he doesn't even give her a good excuse either. He's like, I don't know. We've always just kept his family with ours. You could have gone with he's old and senile, but you couldn't even come up with that. Actually, I think it was around this time. I don't know what face Lucille made, but it was when Edith was somewhere in the house and Lucille was asking him, why did you choose Edith? And in my notes, I wrote in big letters, she's Cersei.
Yeah.
This like toxic incestual love that's really gross and obnoxious and very predatory on her part, and then like the jealousy and the ugliness, I don't know, everything. I was like, man, she is Cersei through and through.
Yeah, she totally was. I mean, her whole attitude just because she was always kind of creepy to begin with, but man, it seemed like every little thing Edith said or did just kind of irked her.
Well, and then you find out that there had been a baby in the house a while back, and you find out the baby was Thomas and Lucille's, and even the way she talked about the baby reminded me of the way that Cersei talked about Joffrey.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Right? Where she was like, the baby came out wrong and we should have killed it, but I wanted it, I loved it. And Cersei had a very similar monologue where she was like, you love this thing that you gave birth to and you watch it grow into a monster, but you still love it.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
Yeah, total throw up in the mouth because that's just so gross. Every time she spoke, I was just like, please don't speak because I just can't stomach anymore.
Right. I knew the tea was poison almost immediately.
Yeah, because I kept focusing on it. I was like, what's in the tea?
Well, and I think that he said that it's firethorn berry or something, and she's like, well, it's really bitter. And then he kind of walks away from her and makes a comment that only bitterness grows there and you have to be bitter to survive. And I was like, all right, you need to calm down.
Yeah.
And if you're that unhappy, bro, just leave. I get it's not that simple. I'm not an idiot and I've definitely lived through it, but I don't know. It was frustrating because he very clearly knew what was happening was wrong and he didn't do anything about it for quite some time.
Yeah. When he was like, oh, only bitterness grows here, I was like, dude, you were just in America where you said this was a land of opportunity. So like, why didn't you stay? Like, you could have stayed if you wanted to, bro. Like everything was there for you. So I was just like, whatever, Tom.
Yeah, I don't understand their desire to, it felt like Lucille had convinced him that together they were the last of their name and that they had to make I don't know, it felt like this very toxic, we're the last ones here, our family's in ruin, but we only have each other, and so we have to like make it work. And so he was always trying to get that machine of his to work. It definitely Cersei. But I also connected him to Bluebeard almost immediately because he was talking about the clay processing room or whatever that's at the very basement level of the house. He tells her sort of what it is, and he goes, "But don't ever go down there."
Yeah.
All right, Bluebeard.
Yeah.
Murdering all your wives and
Yep.
taking their money.
Yeah.
Don't go in that room.
Which that reminds me, because I kept getting Beauty and the Beast references. When he said that, I kept thinking of the animated Disney Beauty and the Beast, where it's like no one's allowed in the West Wing because it's like magic
Oh.
roses are there.
Oh my God, I totally did not pick up on that.
I mean, it's a fine line between Disney and horror, and I think I walk it well.
Around the time that I was like, all right, she's Cersei and he's Bluebeard, but together they're flowers in the attic. And
Yeah.
that's tragic for both of them. I mean, so now we're starting to see all of the secrets of the house. Edith is being haunted by not just Lady Sharp, but of all of the women that have passed away.
Yeah.
Lady Sharp is the one with the cleaver in her head, but I think that Enola is the one who was in the closet because those were her wax cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see someone else with the baby, and there were a lot of ghosts. There were a lot of things haunting that house. And it wasn't just the ghost, though. In the very beginning of the movie, Edith keeps telling her editor that it's a ghost story, but the ghosts are just a metaphor.
Yeah.
And that was Crimson Peak completely.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice that when you first see Lady Sharp, she reaches her hand out to Edith and she's missing her ring finger.
Yeah.
And earlier, Lucille was like, "You can have the ring, but it belongs to me because I earned it." And I was like, "What?"
I know. I was totally freaked out by that. I was like, oh gosh. And then when she said, like, we're buying something, I was like, ooh, gross. And then, yeah, I picked up on the missing of the ring finger and I was like, oh.
Yeah. I don't think I picked up on that the first time. I knew that what she meant when she said she earned it because she killed her mom or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually sawing off, I mean, that the bitch was dead. Couldn't you just take the ring?
I know.
That is some extra level hatred just to cut off the finger.
Yeah, I think it points to Lucille's sanity at that point.
Yes.
She real crazy, okay?
And I think it was McMichael who eventually is talking about after the suspicious murder of the mom. Okay, that Thomas gets sent to a boarding school, and in the paperwork it says that Lucille goes to a convent, and McMichael says, "But I think it was another type of institution."
It's so funny how he was so kind of like a lame duck in the beginning of the movie, and then in the very last half hour, I was like, "Oh, where'd all this insight come from, bro?"
McMichael. One thing I think really set Lucille off was, and we saw it play out, but she gave a different excuse, was when Edith and Thomas stayed overnight at the depot, and she was like, "You stayed there alone, and I was so worried that you were hurt or dead or whatever." And you could tell though that she was jealous of the possibility of them having had sex.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't think that she ever finds out that they did have sex, because in the end of the movie, Lucille is bragging that of course the baby was hers because he never fucked any of those women.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, he got one of them.
Yeah, he got one of them, all right.
But of course it had to have been when he was out from under her thumb.
Yeah.
Although he made some serious moves on her in the attic.
I know. I was like, oh, they're about to, oh my gosh, the sister's gonna walk in and all hell's gonna break loose. And then when she walked in and just gave tea, I was like, oh, okay.
You could tell he was scared. He heard her keys jangle in the background in the elevator.
Yeah.
And he was like, "I heard a noise." Oh my God, I just realized he was the virgin girl, or like the girl in the horror movie.
He was! Oh my gosh, yes!
Edith was trying to get some, and he was like, "Wait, I hear a noise."
Yeah. And then after he slept with her, he died.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whoa.
And, you know what? And he even showed us his butt.
That's true. He did, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. They did play into that trope because, show me your boobs. No, we saw the butt.
Huh.
Just blew my mind.
I only have a few more notes here. As everything began to unravel, Edith was being poisoned, and the ghosts were showing her sort of the steps that she needed to discover the truth of what happened to Lady Sharp and the other, 4 wives?
Mm-hmm.
And
because she was the 4th. Because they kept referencing you went to London, Edinburgh, and Milan, and now America.
Oh, right. And now America. Yep. I thought that he had fallen in love with her fairly early, but you really don't see the follow through in Thomas of outright disobeying his sister until McMichael is there.
Yeah.
And maybe he sees McMichael as Edith's salvation. You know, Lucille is kind of baiting Thomas, and she's like, you never get your hands dirty, and da da da. And he takes the knife and he goes to stab McMichael, but he tells him, you're a doctor, show me where. He wants McMichael to survive so that Edith will eventually survive. Thomas, I think, has already kind of given up hope that he can be with Edith, even though she was like, yeah, we don't have to stay here, we can go wherever we want. And he was like, wait, really? We could go wherever we want? This crazy bitch has never said that.
Right.
Oh, I did want to point out that when Edith caught Lucille and Thomas together, they were in the nursery.
Oh, I didn't realize they were in the nursery.
Yeah, and it made me wonder if that was the only place they ever, because, you know, she left their bedroom many times looking for him, and she never found him, but she never went up there.
Right, yeah.
And it made me wonder if, because that was the genesis of their abuse, that was the only place that she could really coerce him.
Right. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, his eyes were closed during their little encounter too, right?
Yes.
Oh my God, just disgusting.
I know. It was so sad. And then before Lucille pushes her off the stairs, Edith was like, I'm so stupid. I thought you were his sister. And then she goes, isn't it delightful? I am. And I was like,
so gross. So gross. And I was like that too. I kept thinking, like, maybe she's not his sister. Maybe that's his real wife. And they're just putting on airs. And then I was like, oh no, 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 no.
Yeah, it was all pretty terrible. And as Edith is trying to finally run and flee, Lucille is trying to force her to sign over the fortune. And Edith stabs her with her father's pen and goes to try to escape down the elevator shaft. But Thomas is there and he's like, wait for me here if you trust me. I'm going to get your papers back. You know, we won't sign over the fortune. And he's like, but you also can leave. And I remember thinking, like, I'd fucking leave. Like, look, I get that you're a good dude, I guess, now that you've come around. But at this point, no, I'm done. Bye. Let me go pick up McMichael from the clay basement area and then good luck. Yeah. But the scene where Thomas is trying to convince Lucille that they can start over all together, and she was like, all of us, the three of us, and then she stabbed him. I was like, oh, poor guy. The only part about that I didn't appreciate was that they somehow expect us to believe that that knife was any way able to go through those sharp ass cheekbones of his.
I know. And also, when she first stabbed him, she stabbed him literally the same place that he stabbed the doctor. And I was like, wait a minute. So you're telling me it's not a fatal blow when he stabs the doctor, but it's almost near fatal when Lucille stabs him? Okay.
I didn't even notice that. I was so worked up over the cheekbone thing because I was like, the knife is no match for those cheekbones. There's just, I don't believe it.
Yeah, same. And he struggled to take that knife out, okay? It would have been a struggle to put it in there, but whatever.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Toro.
Which reminds me, I totally forgot to mention the plot hole, which was when Lucille was trying to force her to sign over the paperwork. She was doing the villain monologue.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, we got away with it because we always went after women that didn't have anybody else in their lives. They were all alone. And then I was like, wait a minute. But McMichael's sister was not alone. Were you really going to murder that whole fucking family?
Right? Because when she mentioned that, I was like, wait a minute. You didn't go there for Edith. You went there for the sister. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, that was a major plot hole. But, you know, and all of those things too, before Thomas died, Thomas was still trying to convince Lucille we can all be together. We died long ago in these halls and these rotting walls. And then at the very end, his ghost, I thought, reflected just how dead inside he must have felt all those years, which was even sadder. He looked so forlorn and but also unable still to do anything. And he looked like he knew he was unable to do anything. He looked so distressed.
Yeah, my heart was so filled with sadness for him. I knew he was longing, and like you said, like he felt helpless. He knew he was helpless. He always had been in a way. Even in death, he couldn't find freedom from everything. I was like, wow, poor guy.
Yep. I know. Although I did find it interesting that, as far as we can tell, that was the only time that Lucille saw a ghost.
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, for sure she would have, I mean, she have wanted to go back to the house if she had seen all the other ghosts, but I doubt she saw them, like you said.
I think that she probably would have gotten a sense sick sort of pleasure out of knowing that her mother was haunting the house because she killed her.
Yeah.
The other ghosts were a little too active to want to stay there, but it was his ghost that, like, he just looked so, it was so sad.
Yeah, his ghost was really, it really made me sad. Which again, another red flag. So I was like, I want to help that ghost.
I know.
Like,
Oh,
I don't know. They
not
did a
helping.
good job with him and his characterization.
They really did, because he's definitely not the guy you should be with, but throughout most of the movie, you still knew that you were just as susceptible to his charm as Edith was, which is dangerous. It's so dangerous.
So dangerous.
Then, like, after movies like that and Hick, all I can do is have this really severe introspection with myself where I have to ask some serious questions like, Sadina, why? Why are you like this?
Yeah. I guess it just means that as grown women, we still have some learning to do about ourselves.
Yeah.
Because I always think that in my next relationship, I will avoid those red flags and I will see them and I will avoid them like the plague. And then the Crimson Peak comes over. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm falling for all the red flags. In my notes, I only have a couple things. I wrote down a couple of references that you touched on that I just thought were really funny. Like, you know, she says it's not a ghost story, it's a story with ghosts. I was like, oh, yeah, that's how the movie was. It's a story with ghosts. And then she wrote the ghosts are a metaphor. I was like, yes, the ghosts are metaphors. And then, of course, I have the Mary Shelley comment because she ended up becoming a widow.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even realize that she did. She followed through with what she wanted.
Yeah. And then I wrote down the author Conan Doyle in Alan's bookcase. I was like, oh, but he actually did do some detective work. Like, look at him. And then there was one thing that she said when they spent the night at the depot when Thomas had asked her about her characters and how she writes them and how they're going to end. And she goes, she mentions that they change in ways she doesn't expect. And I was like, oh, that's like a foreshadowing of Thomas because he did change in a way that we didn't expect.
You know, I didn't catch the foreshadowing, but I thought it was the moment in him where he was like, wait, I can make a choice.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Because he questioned her. He was like, choices. And she's like, yeah, you know, characters, they change and they tell you what they want to do. They make choices. And that look on his face where he was like, I didn't realize I could make my own choices.
Yeah. Sad little puppy.
I know.
I also wrote down when Edith stabbed Lucille with a pen. I was like, the pen is mightier than the sword. Because, you know, she had the knife in her hand. Listen, you got to expect at least one goofball comment from me, right?
Just about to say that you always seem to have one comment where it's a little dorky.
I mean, it's just who I am. I was really obsessed with the whole butterfly versus moth motif that they did because I kept thinking, like, in the very beginning, Lucille shows her the butterflies and tells her how the moths eat pretty things. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of, you're weird. This is not something you tell someone that your brother is courting, but okay. And then when they got to Cumberland, I was like, oh, look, there are all the moths on the wall. That's not a good sign.
Did you notice that they were only in the nursery?
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Man, this movie was just so gross. When Lucille's doing her monologue, she's got the collection of butterflies and she's braiding Edith's hair. I was like, you're the moth to Edith's butterfly. And that's just gross.
I forgot that I wrote that down because I wrote it actually up with the casting names. Next to Mia Wasikowski, I wrote Butterfly. And then next to Jessica Chastain, I wrote Black Moth.
Which, kudos to Jessica Chastain, because we were talking in pre-production about how we did not even realize that was Jessica Chastain, because I did not.
No, she not only looked different, but and I know that she's an actress, but she was entirely a different person.
She did a good job in that role. The next movie I watch with her in it, it's gonna be hard for me to distinguish her in a new role. I liked her character development. Whenever we talk about characters that gave us the creeps, she's gonna be one that I talk about. And one of the things I wrote down at the end was that all of Del Toro's endings are left kind of open to the viewer to interpret what happens. I think normally someone would assume that Alan and Edith got together. I was like, well, maybe, okay, maybe, but maybe she went on to be a writer. I don't. And so I liked the ending for what it was. One of the things that I thought was really gross was when Edith and Thomas first walked into the house as a married couple and he stepped on the wood planks and the ore was leaking. I was like, that's just so disgusting. I was eating and I was like, I gotta stop eating because like I was feeling nauseous.
That's funny because that's actually the part that I was like, oh, it's literally sinking into the red, like their stalks. And you got grossed out.
That's just so disgusting. And I just kept thinking, like, Edith, why didn't you leave, girl? That house is a big old red flag. Like, literally. But I really liked it. I did notice that in the 4 movies that we watched, Pan's Labyrinth, The Orphanage, Shape of Water, and Crimson Peak, that the main characters were strong female-led characters who trusted their instincts to a certain point, because Edith kind of forgot her instincts a little bit, and I felt like she needed to. And I don't know if when we chose it, you knew that we're going to be talking about 4 strong women, but I love that correlation. Go us women.
Yeah, I did not even think about that.
When I was around, I was like, did Sedina know when she paired? Sedina's like, let's do Del Toro. I was like, yes, let's do Del Toro. And so we were talking about different movies to pair up. And then when these 2 are finally set, I just went along for the ride. I don't care. And so when I'm writing down, I was like, man, Sedina, look at her. Like all these 4 strong females. Like, go ahead, Sedina.
No, I am not that smart. People give me way too much credit.
So, I mean, I guess the last question before we end is, why did we need these 2 movies? What did you get out of it that you think you'd take into real life?
Out of The Shape of Water, I think I got just a lot of stuff that you actually can see in a lot of other movies in general, that, hey, racism is bad, so is homophobia, so is othering people just because they're not like you. White male American exceptionalism is toxic and terrible.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, but those are things that you can get a lot. Well, maybe that's not fair, because if we got a lot of those messages in media, we wouldn't have that problem.
Right.
But I consume a lot of those messages because I know it's true.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Crimson Peak, and I got more of it out of it this time than the first time I watched it, because when you're in the theater, you're just there for the experience. And when I watched it at home, I could stop and think about things. And I really do think that with Crimson Peak, it helps me dig in a little deeper into some of the romantic anxieties or the romantic pitfalls or I don't know really how to explain it. So a few years ago, my bubby was asking me, like why I was still single and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, mom just passed away. And da, da, da. And my bubby just kind of looks at me and she goes, I think you're afraid. And I felt so shook.
Yeah, she saw into your soul.
Right. I remember sitting on the couch and being like, I'm gonna leave now because I don't like that you just saw that and we barely know each other, like, really. But I think about that a lot. I was offended because I was like, she doesn't know me. And then I was like, but also, is she right? And so I think that movies like Crimson Peak sort of help me personally dissect those hurdles that maybe I don't really look at or accept. It's hard being aromantic because I can't date the same way other people do. I can't engage in sexual activity the same way people do. I have to make up the rules as I go, and they still don't always feel right. So Crimson Peak kind of helps with a lot of that.
I think for me, the thing that I took out of both of them was appearances can be deceiving, just because a character like Eliza, if I met her in real life, so I'm going to be honest, I would want to kind of take care of her and help her through life, when really I should just move out of her way because she's a bad bitch. And then in the role of Tom, for sure, the whole romantic side, like I completely get. Guys, I haven't been in a full-on relationship since my daughter's dad, and I'm so afraid to go into a relationship with a man because I don't know what their character really is, because you don't really like. I was with my daughter's dad for a long time, and when our relationship dissolved, I felt like I didn't know who he was, and I trusted this man long enough to have a child with him. Like there are some scars that I have that I'm healing, and I'm always afraid that I'm going to get into that same sort of situation. And with The Shape of Water, like I was left kind of craving romance in my life because like I haven't had it for 6 years. When the Starbucks barista remembers my name, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's flirting with me, you know? I mean, it's just so it's just that appearances can really be deceiving. And even though someone as so handsome as Tom Hiddleston. Goes, oh my God, y'all. Y'all don't think he's handsome. We got a problem. But someone as handsome as he can be so broken and be willing to let his sister, he really allowed his sister, he enabled her in ways that he probably shouldn't have. You know, he did it because the money helped. They didn't use the money to fix the house, not at all. They used the money to fix his machines. So he allowed her to do these like really disgusting things to further his own agenda. So he's not, I mean, granted, I feel bad for him, but he's still wrong in his own way. And so for me, it's a lot of self-reflection too. You're attracted to these men that are not necessarily good. Why is that? You need to like really explore that, Jennifer. I'm like, oh gosh. So I mean, they were good movies though.
They were good movies. And I will admit that also after Shape of Water, I was like, wow, that I understand why people seek out long-term relationships in their lives. I've never personally done it because it's more difficult for me. But after watching Shape of Water, I was like, I get that feeling of acceptance and being seen for who you are is really enticing. And I was like, man, I just can't get past certain things. I'm not going to admit that my Bubby was right. Maybe a little, but like Bubby came out swinging on that one.
Listen, she didn't mince words. She didn't hit a darling in there in front of it. She didn't sugarcoat it. She just, Sadina, you're afraid.
Yeah, and I was like, let's change the subject. I was so attacked.
I mean, she knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
Oh man, I wish I could have met her because man, I mean, not really because I don't want to be attacked either. I don't need her to see me. That's the last thing I need from anybody is to see inside my soul. But you know.
I mean, she was a riot though in other ways. We'll talk about that someday, but my Bubby was a riot. She definitely was at that age where she was like, look, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say, and you ain't gotta agree, but this is how I feel.
And she said it.
Right. No take backs, no nothing.
Nope. I strive to be that person in my old age. I can't wait. And I think with that, we'll end and we'll see y'all next episode.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast. Check out our website by going to lastlibraryontheleft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryontheleft.com.